which leads us
Good.
to section 5, what the thunder said. Basically, the thunder said, do 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 do, da 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 da.
Da
That's
da
all I
da.
want to say to you. Da 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 da
Exactly.
da. This Sanskritic root appears in 3 power words from the Upanishads: datta, give; daya dadvam, sympathize; and damyata, control. Okay, and what about it?
Well, first we can say that Eliot's favorite section apparently is the first few lines of this. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe we can think about why. But he wrote, "After the torchlight red on sweaty faces, after the frosty silence in the gardens, after the agony in stony places, the shouting and the crying, prison and palace and reverberation of thunder of spring over distant mountains. He who was living is now dead. We who were living are now dying with a little patience."
Wow, man,
I'll
so
give you
deep.
some.
He's a genius.
Come on, man. Come on, man.
Profound.
Come on, man. All right.
Wea la la lea, wala la la lea la la. That's a Wagnerian leitmotif, man. We're it's variations on a theme.
All right. I'll give you a couple. I'll feed you a couple things that I found. First, the gardens are likely the gardens of Gethsemane.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of back to spring now because it's Passion Week. If we're willing to say that this is like the death of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and I read quite a bit about the kind of awkward phrasing in the last couple lines, especially like, "We who were living are now dying with a little patience." I think that the critic I was reading suggested 2 other ways that would be written, which would be like more clear. I'm trying to remember. Uh, like if you said without patience,
Mm-hmm.
or if you said with patience, something like that. But with a little patience is like kind of confusing because it's like
Mm-hmm.
we don't exactly. It's hard to kind of get into the mindset of these people. I'm not 100% sure that the "he who is living is now dead" is Jesus. But I don't know. I quite like the torchlight red on sweaty faces. Is that like? Do you remember the scene in the Bible where they come upon? I think what they come upon Judas or they come upon Jesus and arrest him. Oh, Jesus, right?
Well, that's
There's like
that's in the Garden
a
of Gethsemane.
okay, yeah, and there's like a commotion. So that I mean, they wouldn't have had torchlight, but it kind of feels like that scene.
Okay, why wouldn't they have torchlight?
Um, okay, sorry. I guess they would. Yeah, I'm thinking. I'm
they
thinking of
had
like an
they
electric
had
torch.
discovered fire by then, I'm pretty sure.
Sure, sure.
Well, before we proceed, what is the element associated with this section? Like burial of the dead, that's earth. Um,
Right.
chess
It's
is
meant to be
whatever.
air. It's supposed to
Okay,
be
this is
air.
air. This is air. So burial of the dead, that's earth. The fire sermon, obviously fire. Death by water, obviously water. So what the thunder said, this is air. Okay, that makes sense.
So, do you want to do anything with that first stanza, or
Well, I don't know what else to say about it. You like the phrasing, basically. Um, do you want to go any deeper than that?
well, just moving on to the second stanza? It's like very clear. This is again the wasteland. Here is no water, but only rock. Rock and no water in the sandy road.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of repetition of 4 particular nouns: rock, road, mountains, and water.
Water.
Often water being without.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard this described compared to like a broken up sestina. I kind of liked that idea. You know
Mm-hmm.
what a sestina is, I'm sure.
Yeah,
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 and so
with repetitive lines.
and endings, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, poetically, this is pretty good, and the
and I
repetition
guess
is key to that.
we're really just feeling the tension of the poem. I guess you could say like a kind of build up, a crescendoing of claustrophobia. I would argue.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're just feeling how the dead mountain mouth of carious teeth that cannot spit. Here one can neither stand nor lie nor sit. I was reading some interesting criticism about that, which is just like in this life that we're in, like you can't achieve any type of like fruitful thought or like let's say that you need to stand or lie or sit to pause and take things in. You don't have time, right? You just have this thirst and you're just moving on. There's not even silence in the mountains. So if we thought about today with like your phones, you know, it's like there's never a moment of real solitude here,
Mm-hmm.
which comes in the next, yeah. But red sullen faces sneer and
No, before
snarl.
that, but dry, sterile thunder without rain.
Mm,
There's not even solitude in the mountains, but red, sullen
yeah.
faces sneer and snarl from doors of mud-cracked houses. If there were water. Actually, that
Mm.
seems to go with the next part. No, this is pretty good. Like the poetic phrasing here with the repetition. I like this. And, it's like he's mourning the fact that there's no water, but also water is associated with death. So, like, where can we find relief? Not in fire, not in earth, not in water, maybe only in air. If we just evaporate, that's the only solution to the wasteland.
Well, we're gonna get. Don't worry, the thunder's gonna talk in a second, and
Oh,
so it'll tell
thank
you what the
thank
solution is.
God. Thank Eliot. All right, so keep reading. If there were water and no rock, if there were rock and also water, and water, a spring, a pool among the rock, if there were the sound of water only, not the cicada, and dry grass singing, but sound of water over a rock where the hermit thrush sings in the pine trees, drip, drop, drip, drop, 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 but there is no water.
I had one clever original thought. So whenever I have an original thought, it's like a big
Mm-hmm.
boo boo boo. Just with the dry grass singing, I don't know if that's like I can kind of see a Whitman connection there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Mm-hmm.
and you see how starkly different they are. I
What,
mean,
Whitman and Eliot?
yeah, and I mean, I don't think you when you think of Whitman's grass, there's no grass that could be more plentiful and
Oh
lush
yeah,
and
yeah,
delicious,
yeah.
right? And you can just do anything you want in that grass. But this grass is dry.
Well, the modernists, Pound in particular, had a complicated relationship with Whitman. They rejected a lot of his aesthetic, but there's a famous poem by Pound in which he says something like, "Let there be communion between us." So it's like
Hmm.
they rebelled against the Whitman-esque aesthetic, but Pound at least later made his peace with that tradition. So that's my little contribution
Thank you.
to the discussion. As I'm looking at this again, maybe this is my favorite section 5, because the next part I also like very much, and I think we've got a slide for that. Is there a slide for that? Yes, there is. Who is the third who walks always beside you? I just like the philosophical speculation here, and I'm going to read it. I'm going to recite it. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Who is the third who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together. But when I look ahead up the white road, there is always another one walking beside you, gliding wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded. I do not know whether a man or a woman. But who is that on the other side of you?
I'm glad we're doing quite a bit of reading because it reminds us, it reminds me, it reminds the audience that poetry should be read. I don't know if it should be read with constant commentary and interruption, but let's forget that part. And just because, it jumps off the page differently when you hear it. And I think we'll get into this a little bit later. It's hard to say the later when it's been this late, but we do have Eliot speaking passionately about the importance of the musicality of his language, to the point where he says that the musicality itself is like, that's where the meaning lies, more so than in anything else.
Well, this is one of the most musical sections, I would argue, and maybe that's why it seems more effective to me. But this part reminds me of another poem by Juan Ramon Jimenez, who also is a Nobel laureate. In Spanish, it's called Yo no soy yo, I am not I. Very brief, listen to this. I am not I. I am this one walking beside me whom I do not see, whom at times I manage to visit, and whom at other times I forget. The one who remains silent while I talk, the one who forgives, sweet, when I hate, the one who takes a walk when I am indoors, the one who will remain standing when I die. So this kind of complication
that's
of
a very like Rumi vibe.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
and I say that with positive and negative connotations.
Sure. Understood. But
I like it. So yo no soy. What is the title? I want to look it up.
Yo no soy yo. I'm not I.
Yo no soy yo. Yeah. Okay, I found it. Thank you.
And
cool.
I mean, that's kind of a dual identity, whereas Eliot's positing a third component. So.
Do you want some references for this?
Go ahead. Yeah.
There's two. One is Luke 24. They're travelers on the road to Emmaus.
Emmaus, yes.
You probably remember this story. And this is post-resurrection Jesus, who kind of appears as an apparition. He's like there but not there.
Right.
And then the other one is the explorer Shackleton was on an expedition to the Antarctic. And apparently these guys were so drained that they imagined a third party. And the critical addition is that this third party represents the tantalizing vicinity of significance that cannot be caught or comprehended.
I like that. This foreshadows some of the mystical speculations that appear in the 4 quartets later.
Have you read that?
Yeah. That was required reading in my curriculum, so yeah.
How long is that in
Too
comparison to
long.
Prufrock?
Too long. I mean, they're 4, right? They're 4 quartets. Little Gidding and I can't remember the others. You can find
Is
those.
it longer in Total to the Wasteland?
Comparable.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit shorter or longer, but
maybe you can
comparable.
Surprise me when it comes to next text.
Oh,
you're
fuck
gonna be like,
no. That's enough.
It's the
Eliot.
4 quartets, Tom.
That's enough. Actually,
face drop.
Not now, not like anytime soon, but at some point, maybe we should revisit.
I wouldn't
those.
be opposed. I know.
There's
him like his Anglican face, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you can hear readings by famous British actors. I think Ray Fine did a recitation like on film, and whoever else has probably tried his hand at it. It's like a rite of passage for the aspiring British thespian. Read some Eliot. Like I said,
But again, is it like it's more steeped in?
Sting named his child Eliot, Eliot. I can imagine him, after banging Trudy, reading the four quartets and saying, darling, we should name this child Eliot, Eliot.
Okay, that's fine, but I just wanted to say, like, is it pretty steeped in like Christian theology?
There's reference to the word, so yes. I mean, I would say yes.
Well, I mean, does that? I'm saying that kind of like as a worry I would have, like something that would make me reluctant to read it, because even if you think about Bob Dylan, right?
You will regret it if you read that. You'll regret it. You'll say, "Okay, done that, checked it off the list," but why is this so celebrated? I don't know. It's like everything else with Eliot.
Well, my point is that the Wasteland. No, but the Wasteland has like interesting ideas.
Okay, then you will find some of those in the four quartets too, and you'll find some good lines and some good phrasing.
My point was, it's not like some kind of just heavily like pro Jesus biblical.
Well, of course not, but there's a lot of that Christological heavy-handedness in Blake too, right? Like, we all love Blake of The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, but if you read the complete works, like, there's some really I don't know, almost
didactic,
evangelical. Of course, it's in the idiosyncratic Blakean way. Like, his Christ is not that of Jerry Falwell or some dipshit American pastor, right? But it's there's like a lot more of that than I expected. Like, if you go deep into Blake, that's a very significant part of it. His particular view of Christ and Christology and the messianic tradition. So I don't know. I mean, Eliot has his own take on it too, but yeah, if that's not something you're interested in, I mean, for that matter, Pessoa has, his own view of the messianic or the Christological prophecy. So it's unavoidable if you're dealing with poets. I mean, Dante too, right? Dante. They call him Dante here in Taiwan. So anyway, we're off topic. Can we please move on? We're like an hour 42 in. So, all right, this is another famous phrase and one that I very much like. I mean, this is
again, you're just like arbitrarily though jumping. Is that
all right? Then
I'm not saying that. I'm just
the phrase being, "These fragments I have shored against my ruins." That's like
because you've really jumped. You realize that, right?
You're like now
in the last.
Yeah, because I want to gloss over the rest. I'm not interested. But if you want to go back and
you say that, and then I read a stanza to you, and you're like, "It's my favorite one now in the whole poem."
Yeah.
So,
I contain multitudes.
Well, let's just at least. There's the references to the empty chapel. Do you want to talk about that? I don't really care, but
no.
The empty chapel being the chapel perilous from the Holy Grail.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then in that stanza, we finally do get water. Because, I mean, in the damp gust bringing rain.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be pretty remiss of us to not, go over the thunder speaking here.
Well, let's not be remiss.
Let's not. So, let's start with Ganga, because I think we'll both kind of enjoy this last section.
Ganga. Oh, Ganga.
Ganga was sunken, and the limp leaves waited for rain, while the black clouds gathered far distant over Himavant. The jungle crouched, humped in silence. Then spoke the thunder. Okay, so
What did the thunder say?
Ganja. Do you know this terrible song? What did the fox say? Have you heard that song?
Mm.
What did the fox say?
Oh yeah, yes.
I keep,
Yeah.
I keep thinking of that. It's fucking up the poem for me.
What did the thunder say?
So
Da.
Himavant, Himalayas. Himavant also is the Hindu god of snow. And you've mentioned these three terms. We don't have to get into it deep, but just to say that, I mean, I'll kind of leave it up to you to somewhat, but I'll just contextualize it. So the thunder speaks, and Da means what again?
I mean, it's a root.
Do you know?
It's a root, right?
Ah, yes, that's right.
Da is the voice of thunder.
Yes,
I'm looking at a note. As Hugh Kinner explained it, if the race's most permanent wisdom is its oldest, then Da, the voice of the thunder and of the Hindu sages, is the cosmic voice not yet dissociated into echoes. It is the root of Datta, give, Dayadvam, sympathize, and Damyata, control, each of which appears in this final section of the poem. Interestingly, Eliot reshuffled their order from the original Damyata, Datta, Dayadvam. You know why he reshuffled them?
I do not.
Because he's a genius, man. It's brilliant. He just said, I'm going to flip the script on this Upanishad shit. I'm going to reappropriate it because I'm a modernist.
So, and Da also is yes in Russian.
Yes, indeed.
I wanted to give a bit more context then. So very good what you just said. So this term Da was spoken and it was understood three different ways by different parts of the audience. It
also reminds one of Dadaism, right?
Thank you. So the men are in the first group, they understand it to be datta, being give, as in alms. The second group understood it to be sympathize, be compassionate, and that was the demons.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third group were the gods, and they understood it as to be damyata, as in self-control. So just, again, I don't know if you want to dip into these stanzas. If you don't, the short version would be that, and again, I'm happy to dip into them. I'm happy to read them. But if we don't, then this is the moral instruction given to us by the Upanishads, given to us by Eliot, by Tiresias, whatever. And again, we're supposed to be generous. We're supposed to give of ourselves, get out of our ego cages. We're supposed to be compassionate. And we are supposed to have self-control. And that kind of takes us through those stanzas.
Mm-hmm.
So
we
should revive for a moment a broken Coriolanus.
Yeah, do you want to dip into that broken anus?
Well, just to say that hemorrhoids are a real thing, and we shouldn't make it a taboo topic because...
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you probably know the story of Coriolanus. I mean, I know it. Well, I've seen it performed, and I did know it. I would just say that I know the basics now. He's not a particularly favorable hero because he's steeped in pride, although he does ultimately refuse to siege Rome, to take siege on Rome. And
besiege Rome.
Maybe you can help me out.
What's his mom's name?
Rome.
Is it Volumnia?
I'm not sure.
He's like manipulated by the shadow maternal figure. I want to say her name is Volumnia, but anyway.
Okay.
The dark side of the Roman matron is what she represents. That's about all I remember. Brecht did
The
a.
line in Data.
Mm-hmm.
Go on.
Well, there was Brecht. There was a famous Brechtian production of Coriolanus, so I'm sure that would have been interesting to see his take on it. His, the Berliner Ensemble's take on that Shakespearean play.
I liked the line in the Data section, the awful daring of a moment's surrender. I think that's like quite tattoo quotable.
Baristas take note.
Yeah. But it kind of feels like that fear in a handful of dust type line, you know?
The beneficent spider. That's an interesting image.
Yeah, I'm a bit uncomfortable with how ostensibly moralistic the poem turns towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if actually, like, I totally love these types of ideals, like, I think they're fantastic, but I think you probably agree with me, I don't like how it's delivered with a kind of pretension or sneer, right? It's like, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like after all this kind of condemnation in a way of humanity, then to deliver this moral, it feels less like moral food and more like moral lecturing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's unfair.
Okay.
I mean, because it's being delivered by thunder, you know? And if we think about thunder and like brimstone type stuff, you know, it feels that has like
Well, it's
an
literally a
energy
voice
of
a
like,
voice from heaven, right? So it's like the voice of the divine or God or
it
the
just seems
gods.
like it just seems like it's racked with like negative imagery throughout. I mean, each in his prison, um, empty rooms.
Are we on the last stanza
We've got
yet?
the Fisher King
Yeah,
in the second to
I was
last
just gonna
stanza.
say, oh, the second to last.
Yeah,
Okay, the way
the last stanza starts with London Bridge. Yeah.
not in my text, but that's okay. I sat upon the shore
Okay.
fishing with the arid plain behind me. That's a pretty explicit reference to the Fisher King, and we talked about the connection between land.
And the wasteland.
Well, yeah, the connection between land and water, right? Like he's
Sure.
he is on this arid plain, and that reminds us of Matthew Arnold's Darkling Plain from Dover Beach, or at least it reminds me of that. Uh, and you know, um, he's obviously fishing in the water, so we're at the juncture between land and water. So again, there's that ambiguity about what the wasteland is. This is also the site of the death by water. So I don't know. Can the wasteland be aquatic in some way?
Why is that especially interesting? I'm not saying it's not. I'm
Well,
just asking
because the
you.
title is the wasteland, you think of Earth, right? But there's all of this reference to death by water. So, and then there was the part that we just read about the water and the rock. They're associated throughout. Like there's
Okay, but
there's
what's
like
your
a
like life
there's
relevance
a
that you
well
get from
there's like
that?
a mourning for the lack of water. There's a mourning of that aridity, the arid plain. There's
Yes.
no water, it's all desert, right? But with the water comes death by water, right? So is it hopeless? There's death everywhere. There's death in the fire of passion. There's death by water. There's death in the wasteland, the arid plain. So the only salvation is in the air. The like if we evaporate from our bodies, that's the only release. That's the only way we can
No,
experience peace and the shanti, shanti, shanti.
no, you just need some data and davad yavam and
Yeah,
some damiata.
yeah. So that's the only way. Give,
Well, I guess it's like a transcendence of the elements and of the body, and
give, sympathize, control. Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like, oh, wow, he gives this neat prescription. Sorry, I bummed you out for 4 sections, but hey, just give, sympathize, and control, and it's all good. And you'll float up into the air and you'll escape fire, water, and earth. And I don't know, the game of chess too, like that's kind of an unruly section, right? Like what do we do with that?
well, I think we would
Is
be.
that the ether? You know, that there's earth, water, air, fire, but then later in later antiquity there was a fifth element which was called ether, right? That's like beyond the air. Is the game of chess, is its element the ether? Because it's kind of like a mental, when you're playing chess, you're in like the mental or psychological realm.
You should write an essay about that.
Oh God, please no. But
I think we should.
you know what I'm saying,
Yeah,
right?
go on. I do, but I don't really know enough about ether to, and I think that it's probably a stretch.
Oh, is it? Oh, it's a stretch, huh? Okay, okay. What about the Chinese elements of earth, wood, metal, fire, and water? Could the game of chess be related to the wood element or metal?
Could be. There is wood that makes up chess pieces
That's
often,
what
or
I'm
the chessboard
thinking.
itself.
Who can we ask? Eliot, was that your intention? Oh, the new
Well,
critic said intention doesn't matter, so we can make our own decision about it.
I want us to kind of get to some of the commentary we've put in the last section of the slides, so I think we
Well,
should get
definitely,
through the
since
last
we're
stanza.
almost 2 hours in, we need to wrap this shit up. But
That's what I'm
yeah,
saying,
but
bro.
these
So,
fragments I have shored against my ruins. That's
yes,
an important. I mean, that's
of
basically
course.
like the key to the whole poem.
Yes,
So,
yes.
I mean, isn't that self-explanatory? Can we just carry on?
No, we
Oh,
can't.
okay. You said you wanted to get to the other parts, so
I know, but I mean, why does this line resonate with you?
because that's what
How do
this
you.
is. We've got all these fragments, and it's like the modernist ethic too, right? You've got all these fragments, which are, uh, I don't know, protections against psychological and spiritual ruin, right? It's kind of like these texts that are created out of these fragments are amulets or talismans to uh, lead us through the wasteland of modern existence. It's like all we have.
But I mean, would you describe the texts that you create as like fragment based or fragment
I
driven?
think so, more so in the Burroughs cut up sense than in the Eliot sense of fragments, but that's one reason why this is one of my favorite lines. I can connect nothing to nothing, and these fragments I have shored against my ruins. So you can think of it in terms of fragments too, like I don't know, like a mosaic consists of all these little pieces which are glued together to make one mm, image or I don't know, creation. You can think of bits of paper glued together to make a collage. You can think of the cut up text of Burroughs or Bowie or
Well, let's talk about the
whomever.
wasteland. I mean,
The what?
is it the
Uh
wasteland? I
huh.
mean, is
Let's
it?
get wasted.
Well, isn't it an attempt to be like because he's worried about posterity losing its connection to all these seminal texts that he's decided to deliver you with little nuggets of each.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it? So I'm saying, is it like an archaeologist attempt to make a little time capsule,
I like
or
that. I like that. It's more archaeological in his sense. He's like a literary archaeologist, which I also like. Whereas, someone like Burroughs, he's more of a, you wouldn't necessarily call him an archaeologist because the cut up method. Burroughs also uses the image of the cement mixer, which is, quite different. So you just throw everything into the cement mixer and see what comes out. Whereas the archaeologist is carefully trying to reconstruct all of these fragments, right? And that too could be like the, I don't know, could remind us of the image of the mosaic, which is also something that archaeologists might uncover. So it's just a slightly different approach, even though it's all fragmentary. It's all consisting of bits and pieces that are thrown together. There's the literary archaeologist, I would say, has a slightly different approach. There's more care taken to kind of refashioning the past and being more respectful of it, whereas the cut up, maybe there's more violence in the cut up technique or less reverence. It's just like throwing chaos together and seeing what happens. Burroughs is kind of a chaos magician, right? Like he's
yeah, I would just say that like the nature of a fragment is fragmented and isn't necessarily like what quenches the soul. You know what I mean? It's like we complain about fragmentation. Like we talk about like multitasking and the way that modern life makes it hard to focus, and
yes, but the
we're trying
fragments the
to
fragments are pieced together so that you're trying to create order out of this chaos. You know,
yeah.
another, Joyce is another
But has
example.
he done that really?
Who? Eliot?
Has the wasteland done
Oh,
that?
I would say much less effectively than Joyce and Burroughs. So I'm with you there. But I like the idea. I think it's a nice idea.
Yeah, if they reach that unity that you're talking about. I'm just saying if they remain in this like
I
very
think he does
shard.
to a certain extent he does, in his own way. But
Yeah,
again, his
yeah,
aesthetic is not like my ultimate ideal. He's not my preferred artist by any means, but I
right.
can take certain things from it that I find admirable, and this is one of those things. Some of the
Yeah.
phrasing, some of the sentiments, but then others I reject and don't want to go too deeply into because I don't care. I don't care about Mr. Eugenides and who he is, this Smyrna merchant, or even Phlebas.
Why you to be so homophobic,
Even
bro?
not that. It's not about that,
I'm
but
fucking with
even
you, sir.
it's not even. I mean, even Phlebas the Phoenician is like, I don't care about this character. Like he's less compelling to me than say Cadmus the Phoenician or you know
Okay, but you should also admit that when you look at
or
some of these
Leopold
stanzas.
Bloom and Ulysses or Stephen Dedalus, like they're just
Okay, but I'm just saying
mm-hmm.
you also look at some of these stanzas a second or a third time when they open up to you. So
Yes.
I realize that like there are limits in terms of like our time, and even on this podcast, there are limits. So we're having trouble to like close read each stanza,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the time that we're trying to. But my point will be that maybe there are some of those stanzas that we're just running past. Maybe they have something.
Yes, but you can do that with everything, man. You could meditate on a on a
Sure.
on a commercial jingle, a 30-second commercial
Yeah.
jingle for eternity. Yes, of course you can.
Yeah.
And so the closer you look at it, the more profound it becomes in a way, the deeper you can go with it. But our
Right.
time is finite, and I just
Yeah.
I just like to put, I don't know, there's some things I want to go deeper into and other things I
I
don't,
get it,
right?
bro. Let's keep moving. Let's keep moving.
So you just
So
say we need to go deeper, and then I follow
no,
your
I
lead,
don't.
and then you
I
say, "Oh,
don't.
let's keep moving." Okay.
No, you're satisfied with my point.
Okay.
Like I got your point, and I'm just also saying we do have a lot to go
All
still.
right.
He ends the
I'm
poem
happy
with
to move.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Yes. Which when I did an image search, this is what I found. Some Osho.
Nice.
You know Osho, right?
I do, yes.
Whether he's a charlatan or not, I find him very entertaining and engaging. And apparently he's got like a book called Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, and
Yeah.
it says on one edition here, it says can you read this? What does this say?
Yeah. The soundless sound.
The soundless sound.
Peace.
Peace. Yeah. So that's a nice textual connection.
And Shanti is meant to mean the peace which passeth understanding.
Yeah, that's Eliot's gloss. He says the closest English translation would be this biblical phrase, right? I assume that's biblical.
Well, and that's kind of like the Tao, right? You can't really translate the Tao.
Well, yeah, but I don't know if compassion is such a key component in Taoism, right? It's more about mental equilibrium.
Sure,
but compassion is something that comes in
self-control
through Buddhism.
But why are you focusing on compassion?
Oh, well, I don't know, maybe because that's mentioned as one of the Da.
Yeah, but the others are self-control, and which is a type of that could be more closer to the Tao,
Yeah.
And
I just mean the concept of peace is not really emphasized in Chinese thought until the introduction of Buddhism, right? Maybe it's implied, but it's more about self-mastery through becoming like water and just going with the flow and following the Tao. But yes, in the sense that it's a indefinable concept in some ways, I agree.
And like a transcendental one.
Sure.
Let's keep going.
Oh, please. All right, this is you.
Let's keep going.
Oh, we're skipping this.
Fuck
It is possible to read the poem as drama, narrative, and lyric. Okay, fair enough.
If you're going to read it, we should read it.
No, that's enough. It is possible to read the poem as drama, narrative, lyric.
Okay.
And I think that's true. All right. This is you. Imitation is not flattery.
I'm ready to... Yeah.
Transformation is flattery. So, this is Eliot himself. What about it? This relates to his borrowing.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so he says one of the surest of tests is the way in which a poet borrows. Immature poets imitate, mature poets steal.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm burning on fumes at this point.
Yeah, me too.
Okay,
but it's self-explanatory. It makes sense. You transform.
If you've got something to say,
well, it's like like the curation of the fragments, but there's also
It's provocative though, but it's also like, I don't know. It's kind of feels kind of cheap at the same time. Immature poets imitate. I hate this kind of like, oh, okay, you know what I mean? Like this like divider between the good poet and
it's
the
almost
shit poet.
dogmatic. Yeah, and you have to wonder, well, which are you, Eliot? Are you immature or mature? Are you one of the
Yeah, I
bad
just
or
feel
the
like he does a
good?
lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
He does a lot of this in his essays about like defining
Yes,
what is the great poet.
saying the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. That is an inexact formula. So fuck you, Wordsworth. Because
And yeah, I just like find his whole
real
like
poets want to escape from emotion.
exactly. That's all really obnoxious to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you there.
All right, let's keep going.
All right, this is a new slide that you inserted.
All right, this is fresher to me today.
Mm-hmm.
Various critics. This is Eliot. We've got a few pithy, to use an Bill O'Reilly term, a few pithy Eliot quotes, which may be interesting to our listener and the number of listeners we have at this point.
Yeah.
Of the podcast. Various critics have done me the honor to interpret the poem in terms of criticism of the contemporary world. To me, it was only the relief of a personal and wholly insignificant grouse against life. It is just a piece of rhythmical grumbling.
I like that, rhythmical grumbling. He's trying to.
And I like
he's
insignificant
trying to.
grouse.
He's trying to. Yeah. He's trying to downplay. You know.
You gotta say people at the end. He's trying to downplay people.
He's trying to.
You know how you say that sometimes.
I do.
Yeah, like you'll say your phrase. You're like, people. He's trying to.
Okay, people. He's trying to downplay.
No, not like that.
He's being
it's a different voice of yours.
Yeah. He's self-deprecating here. I like that though. That's a nice throwaway line. It's just a piece of rhythmical grumbling, and he's on some level.
Next.
It is. Oh, okay. We're done with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Mm-hmm.
It is. This is like directed at you, Mark.
Okay.
It is expected that the reader of a poem should take at least as much trouble as a barrister reading an important decision on a complicated case.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mark, have you taken the trouble of a barrister when reading this poem today?
Well, when we add these two sessions together, we're well over 4 hours. So, yeah, I think we've been pretty thorough.
Okay. All right. But again, so yeah, and then finally, this is apparently
a great caricature of Eliot, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. This was apparently from a lecture he gave at Harvard, and he said, when it comes to reaching a readership, Eliot once said, "It is the half-educated and ill-educated who stand in his way. I myself should like an audience which could neither read nor write."
That's what he says at Harvard. See, this is another thing I dislike about him, you know. Compare a poet like Rimbaud or Verlaine or Francois Villon, who died in a ditch, to Eliot. Eminence becomes you, as that Jewish poet who, you know, called him out on his anti-Semitism said. Eminence becomes you, doesn't it, Eliot, with your lectures at Harvard?
Yeah. And the irony here is, well, in this lecture, you know, he's trying to kind of say that poetry is this primeval force that doesn't require any understanding to appreciate. And yet,
he just said you should read it
that,
like a barrister.
And also, the number of allusions in this poem, you know, make it incredibly challenging to just listen to and love. So, yeah, it's a barrel of contradictions.
You could argue that, you know, he's elevating the literary consciousness of the masses by just assuming that if they don't know the illusion, they can find it. Like your knowledge of literature or culture, or I don't know, your knowledge and understanding thereof could conceivably be raised a notch just by engaging with this poem. Even if you don't get everything, like you're gonna learn something, right? Even if you just look up one or two illusions.
Yeah, it's weird because this poem is kind of like the opposite of nothing, though. It's like if Shanti just seems like a realm that is beyond the intellect, and this poem is like all about the intellect. So for me, like the poem you just read, the yo no soy yo,
Mm-hmm.
that's more Shanti,
Right.
than
Well,
this. But
would you? So
whatever,
would
I'm
you?
more into the
So
both
would you
ends. But
say that the wasteland is an erudite despair? Or,
yes, I would.
I think I've mentioned this before. Henry Miller called Joyce a pedagogical sadist. You could say the same. Maybe that applies even more so to Eliot.
Mm.
All right, and then I'll let you read
Do you want to
this.
read this? Because you're the big Marshall McLuhan
Well,
fan.
not really,
You can
but
just read.
okay.
Yeah.
I offer here
Really?
an
Okay.
anecdote about my late friend, the distinguished Wordsworth scholar Robert Wolfe, who, as a young man, studied for a time under Marshall McLuhan, then a famous philosopher of the complexity that he thought uniquely the property of the modern world of print culture. Who's talking here? Who's the I?
The critic whose book I've been reading,
Okay. When
which I'll find,
Okay.
and yeah.
When Robert ventured one morning his hesitations about Eliot's poem, McLuhan called for a copy of the Toronto Star, spreading the front page out on the desk. See, Mr. Wolfe, an article about the economy, a photograph of the Queen, a weather forecast, something afoot in ice hockey, an advertisement for hair tonic, a review of the opera, all these happening at once. And then a meaningful look. The point being, I suppose, that Eliot's poem had finally captured something of the definitive character of modernity, as captured in the buzzing, juxtapositional, contingent disorder of a newspaper page. I like that.
Yeah.
But you include that.
Again, I think it could be done in a way that was like more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would be more of the cut up technique. Like I think I could, if that was the main aim, I feel like I could write something that would be more entertaining and more.
Again, Joyce.
But
Joyce is your man. Ulysses, Finnegan's Wake. This is
mm,
just a poor man's Joyce, in a very condensed form.
I can only take your word on it, but I would have to confirm.
All right,
Because
you've
yeah,
included a picture of a dog and this quote from Hamlet: "Though this be madness, yet there is method in't."
I think that's self-explanatory. I mean, some people would make that argument about the poem.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go on. And
Nice.
obviously, there's a lot of Hamlet references.
Yeah.
I'm happy to skip
In
this.
Proofrock too. Well, no, this is interesting. Joyce's use of
Go ahead.
Homer's Odyssey as the novel's foundation had for Eliot the importance of a scientific discovery. And this is a quote: "In using the myth and manipulating a continuous parallel between contemporaneity and antiquity, Mr. Joyce is pursuing a method which others must pursue after him. They will not be imitators, but you are, Eliot, any more than the scientist who uses the discoveries of an Einstein in pursuing his own independent further investigations. It is simply a way of controlling, of ordering, of giving a shape and a significance to the immense panorama of futility and anarchy which is contemporary history. Instead of narrative method, we may now use the mythical method." I like that. I approve of that.
I do like this. Yeah, I do like this. I mean, the idea of like taking a really foundational text, right? I
Mm-hmm.
guess that's one way of looking at this, and yeah, and then kind of imposing a modern context or a modern character and story. It's like, wait, it's nothing. It's not anything. I'm not saying anything interesting here because that's clearly evident in so many texts. But it sounds like a fun challenge if one were about to embark on a new creation.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like, how can I take this and put it into my world?
Yeah, transform the myths of the past,
Yeah.
revive them. I approve of that, and I strive to do something similar in a lot of my work. Although I would
Mm.
say it's not purely a mythical method. It's mythical, psychological, historical, personal, all of that at once. Okay, this is you again.
All right. Well, this is just. I think this is Lovecraft, and he was a critic of this poem. So just maybe as a palate cleanser, someone who's suffered through the poem and suffered through this podcast may like some relief, and this paragraph may help.
Mm-hmm.
So we hear, behold, this is Lovecraft speaking about the wasteland.
Mm-hmm.
We here behold a practically meaningless collection of phrases, learned allusions, quotations, slang, and scraps in general, offered to the public, whether or not as a hoax, as something justified by our modern mind with its recent comprehension of its own chaotic triviality and disorganization. And we behold that public, or a considerable part of it, receiving this hilarious melange as something vital and typical, as a poem of profound significance, to quote its sponsors.
Its sponsors, that's great. We talked before
Yeah, I
about
like that.
the PR machine behind Eliot, right?
Yeah.
Those critics and other supporters who, in the words of Harold Bloom, considered him Christ's vicar on earth, and that is one of my primary objections to the work of Eliot. It's just this pomposity and I don't know, respectability, and this demand that we take it seriously because it's a poem of
Well, come on.
profound
He just said the
significance.
opposite. He just said the opposite in a couple of quotes
Who?
ago. I mean, Eliot.
Okay, so he too contains multitudes and occasionally contradicts himself. But you can't deny the fact that he's not the same kind of poet as, Byron or Rimbaud or Francois Villon, He's a very comfortable middle class banker with financial, okay, maybe he had some financial
Now I think you're
difficulties.
being unfair. And
Okay.
I feel like
Okay.
we've kind of
Poor
been over this.
Eliot.
Well, I just mean
Poor
like
Eliot.
he had a nervous breakdown.
Poor Eliot.
I'm just saying he wrote part of this in a sanatorium. He had a nervous breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
He was married to a fucking psycho.
How
Like,
dare you believe all women?
okay, and also I like the hilarious melange. Let's keep going.
This is great, though. I didn't know this was Lovecraft. That's a nice find. Where did you discover that?
I don't know, somewhere.
Okay, somewhere.
It's called
somewhere.
research. It's called research.
Yeah, you're getting lazy and tired, aren't you? We're only 2.5 hours in. Where's your energy?
I think it's compounded because I'm not that passionate about the poem. Okay, so it's
okay, but
giving this.
But
I can find the energy when it's something I love.
You're upset with me for mocking the fact that it's a poem of profound significance.
No, I just want to. I think you should.
Okay.
Okay, let's go.
Oh my God, another long one.
Okay, this is interesting, though. Again, I don't really believe this, but in speaking about the wasteland, T.S. Eliot's much-discussed modernist poem, Ben Hecht, said on Saturday at Schlogel's that he considered it a subtle joke by Eliot on the American critics. The poem has certain merits in it, said Hecht, as is natural in a poem written by a big man like Eliot.
Big man.
Gonna be a big man? But it differs so radically from his work in Prufrock and other poems that I have no doubt that it was carefully planned by Eliot as a hoax on the American public. I met Eliot in London, and know that he thoroughly hates Americans and everything they write and read, and would consider himself wholly capable of hoaxing the Dial, which is the publication that published him in America, and all its friends. So it is an interesting idea and a rumor at the time, right? That this was like all a big wink wink, and that's funny. So
yeah,
worth adding to the
a
equation.
hoax, a grand literary hoax. I like that aspect of it. You know, that puts it in like the Dadaist tradition, and maybe the da is some
confirmation of that,
an unconscious allusion to the Dadaist movement. Maybe, you know, like Marcel Duchamp's Fountain. You know, he just takes a toilet and signs it and says that's art. So yeah, that's nice. There was something else. The phrase "big man." What's this? You giving me the
next slide?
You giving me the?
No, I'm not. Only if you feel inspired.
What does big man?
I liked where you're going.
What
with
does big man remind?
I love it.
What does that remind you of, big man?
Oh, I know what it reminds me of because we both said it. You were talking about Scarface.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you big man! You kill women and kids. Oh, you're such a big man. All right.
It's a nice dismissal of Eliot.
Yeah. So this is a slide
bro.
called "What the Textual Deviants Said," and these are screenshots from.
They are
screaming. Yeah, from our correspondence, and then also I spoke with G.J. Villa asking for his opinion, my sometime co-author. I asked any commentary on The Wasteland, which is the next text, and G.J. Villa says an epic-defining post-World War I poem about futility, fragmentation, and alienation. Pretty nice summary, right? It's like
I think you should keep going.
No, though. I know, but I'm
funny.
just saying, like, if you ask the standard English teacher description, that's what you would get.
That's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like. Yeah, which is fine.
Right. Oops.
Wait.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I can't see this so well on my screen. Can you read the next part?
All right, I can read it to you. Yeah. And then he asks, why more Eliot? And if you did 2.5 hours on Proofrock, will you do 5 on The Wasteland?
Damn near. We're getting close.
Yeah. And then in the subsequent conversation, this is me asking you, do you like this poem?
And I'm like, The Wasteland?
Innocently, false innocence. Yes, not really, vastly overrated. And as I say, a Ulysses ripoff. We haven't heard you mention that in the podcast at all.
Yes, I did. I said that.
Word.
I'm being
sarcastic, bro, because you said it about 20 times.
Yeah, there you go.
But some great lines, and I like the cut-up aesthetic. And
which we've I mean, maybe that's a mischaracterization of what he's doing. It's not really cut up. It's more, I like the description of it as literary archaeology, which is, you know, I also approve of that. But maybe we can distinguish it from the cut up technique, because it's more like the careful curating of fragments. Maybe we should change the title of this episode to The Careful Curation of Fragments, or Literary Archaeology.
It's definitely a fine art, you know. It's fine art. It's the museum experience, whereas, you know, I don't know if I like to find my poetry, and I don't know if I like my poetry curated at a fine art museum. You know, I like something more visceral and earthy.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of, I mean, maybe this is the best example of literary archaeology at play. All right. Enough. What's the next text?
Release us. Release
Yes.
us. The
Shanti,
next text,
Shanti,
Mark, you can
Shanti.
introduce it.
Me? It's your text.
It's my text, but you've appropriated it.
Oh my goodness.
And as you've appropriated my last text as well, so I really haven't had my own choice for a
Well, but
while.
see, don't say that. Don't
It
act like
feels like mine because I get to bring my buddies on.
so
So
don't
then
act
I get the ego stroke
don't
of that.
act like I'm bullying you into
You're not. You're
yeah.
not. I'm happy to do this, but I still think that you would be better to announce the next text.
Well, the next text is or will be excerpts from Fernando Pessoa's The Book of Disquiet. We're still trying to decide which fragments, which sections we will focus on, because we're not going to, discuss the entire book. We don't have time to reread that, or in Tomek's case, read it for the first time. So we'll narrow it down to probably 9 fragments or sections, and then we will discuss those with a special guest. I'll let you introduce our guest.
We should say this will be a collaborative effort with friend of the show and fellow textual deviant Steve. Steve has done quite a bit of work with this particular text on his YouTube channel, and I think as well via a podcast, and we can get into all that on that particular episode. Suffice it to say that Mark has a very unique window on Pessoa, having translated his work.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. I translated
indeed
mensagem, or message, as it's called in English. Yes, and it's available.
So
it's available in Lisbon. Okay, if you find yourself there, go pick up a copy of my hardcover deluxe edition.
Yeah, and so I'm taking a more reverential tone register in this particular moment to just say that I feel privileged to be opened up to this landscape, just as I was brought into Dylan through Mark and Joe and my dad. So now I'm about to jump into the pool of Pessoa and looking forward to it, because it's particularly this text, the way that Steve's described it, is an emotional text. So I like stuff like that, and it'll be maybe hopefully a nice rebuttal of some sort to
but
Eliot,
it's also
right?
it's also fragmentary, so in that sense there are parallels, but yes, the voice is more as you say, emotional. If Eliot tried to escape emotion, maybe Pessoa did too, but he did so by confronting those emotions and engaging with them, and drinking life to the lees, as Tennyson might say, right? But in terms of the the fragmentary nature of the text, that there is kind of a parallel there, right? Like literally, you could say that Pessoa, his fragments were shored against his ruins.
On that note, Textual Deviant,
yes,
we love you and we leave you.
I don't know if I would put it that way, but yes. Don't forget to subscribe. Mark Will Write, WRITE.substack.com, TomekB.substack.com, and the YouTube channel at Mark Will Write, WRITE. So thank you for getting wasted with us. If you listen to the whole thing, I think we're well over 4.5 hours. So GJ Villa, we almost did spend 5 hours on it. I was being facetious, but here we are. I don't know.
And I do hope that this has been gratifying for some curious undergraduate who comes upon this and maybe wants to hear a different spin on the wasteland than the more
mainstream traditionalist professor would provide.
Yeah, that genuflects to the text completely. We're here to give you a more nuanced view, and we are ready to embrace your reverence as well as your
In
skepticism.
short, your textual deviants. That's how we do it up in this bitch.